have your fellow state attorneys general, some of them expressed the opposite opinion?
Some of them have.
Thanks, sir. You said you drew this distinction between there being an agreement in restraint of trade or concert of action without an agreement. Let me ask this of another witness, one of the participants in the Climate Action 100 Plus. There's something I understand called a signatory handbook. Is that right, Mr. Bienvenu?
I'm not sure about a signatory handbook, but there are signatories.
There are signatories. You're aware there's signatories. Ms. Luber, right? There's signatories as a signatory handbook, isn't there?
There is a microphone, please.
Turn your microphone on, please, ma'am.
Sorry.
And so, look, in my long experience practicing law before I entered the public sector, signing something generally signified something. What do you understand signing to mean, Mr. Bienvenu?
As I understand it, one of the critical things at signing, it says that every decision that has been made and will be made is independently made. It is made in the best interests of those investors, whether that's investment decisions, proxy voting decisions, engagement decisions.
Signing, let me put it more simply, does signing indicate agreement?
No, it indicates that every investor will look at the financial implications of climate risk.
So they're signing to say they're not agreeing to anything, they're agreeing not to agree? No, is that what the signature's about?
They are agreeing to address and look at the financial risks and implication of climate change, whether it's the $93 billion cost to our global economy, to our U.S. economy last year, to look at it.
Ms. Luber, do you understand that agreements to restrain trade are unlawful?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Including an agreement to exert combined economic power to suppress output or increase prices. That's a cartel, right?
And that is absolutely not what Climate Action 100.
So your signers, your signatories are not agreeing to do that, right?
They are not agreeing. They are agreeing to look at climate risk. And each of them says, and the disclaimers in every piece of the material.
Do you seek output reductions of fossil fuels? You do not.
No, the first discussions that have taken place, number one, are disclosure of information. Our market does better when they understand that the insurance industry is pulling out many of our most important states.
Yes, ma'am. No, if we could just answer my questions for me. I understand the Climate Action 100 Plus was designed to harness the collective influence of those signers. Is that right?
To consider climate risk. Not to, each investor has said.
Just to consider it. Not to pressure anybody?
That's right. Each investor votes their own shares, has their own conversations, and needs to. I'm sure CalPERS has 100 staff that are advising their investment office. They are looking at it independently, and they are not looking at what somebody else does.
According to the Climate Action 100 Plus work plan, what I read is that Climate Action 100 Plus was, quote, designed to harness the collective influence of its investor members in order to spur companies on the Climate Action 100 focus list of 170 disfavored companies to accelerate their emissions reductions. Is that right?
If there's a financial risk to those emissions reductions, that's right. Everything about the analysis of companies and investors is about, is there a financial risk?
But it further says that the initiative's goal is for, quote, all companies on the focus list to have committed to net zero or gone out of business as investors are no longer providing them with capital.
Yeah,
that sounds coercive to me. Does it sound coercive to you?
It does not sound coercive.
You ever heard the phrase in the movies, it's a nice little business to be ashamed if something were to happen to it? Isn't that kind of the same thing?
In fact, it is the opposite. The requests of the investors of companies is more disclosure, is adequate, appropriate information for consumers, for people investing.
How many companies have left the Climate Action 100 Plus in the past 6 months?
I'm sorry, how many companies?
How many companies have left?
I believe about a dozen. I don't have the exact number.
Ms. Lamb, you wrote an update to your investors on January 2021, didn't you? It says, the 117th Congress is the most diverse yet. Equality is on the investor and corporate agenda, and the Black Lives Matter movement defined 2020 alongside a global pandemic And here we are facing a second civil war, this one cultural, led by a pro-white, pro-Christian agenda. In other words, make America great again. Did you write those words?
That was a newsletter I wrote following the violent insurrection on the Capitol.
Do you think we're facing a civil war?
The context of that writing was around culture.
Do you think we're facing a civil war, ma'am? Will you answer that question?
From my perspective, we are pro-equality, pro-diversity, pro-religious freedom.
So you won't answer my question whether you think we're facing.
I'm sorry, what I was describing in that piece,
I'll ask you one more time, ma'am.
reacting to the current events was around culture.
Do you think we're facing a civil war?
I don't think we're facing a civil war.
Thank you, ma'am. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We know that many industries across our economy are dominated by a few big players, and as we've seen in recent years, some of these dominant firms have used their size to raise prices and reap record returns, whether in the oil and gas industry, groceries, medical care owned by private equity firms. And I've been encouraged by the enduring bipartisan support on this committee to pursue antitrust reforms to address those anti-competitive influences. But instead of focusing on those reforms to promote competition, we have a hearing here where, once again, Republicans are wasting the committee's time and taxpayer dollars on their culture war against climate change and targeting responsible investing. Let's be clear about what's going on here. As we've heard, there is no illegal collusion by these investors. It's just a made-up controversy, so our colleagues across the aisle can complain about climate change. We know that House Republicans are for free markets until you invest in something they don't like. They support personal freedoms until you do something they don't like. They support free speech until you say something they don't like. And they support law and order until you arrest or convict someone that they do like. So the plain truth here is that climate change is real. Fund managers have proven over and over that ESG factors are part of prudent investment decisions. They help to maximize returns and minimize risk. And right now, climate change is having a material impact on insurance markets, and insurance have to revamp their risk models. I don't think anyone has ever accused actuaries of being woke, until today perhaps. But as we're seeing, climate change is starting to impact nearly every major sector of our economy. And because of real climate change risks and the damage that they bring, it's become difficult and expensive to get new home insurance plans in Florida and California. When people save for retirement or to start a family or send a kid to school, they're thinking far into the future. They're saving for 10, 20, 30, 40 years into the future. And the same thing goes for our large institutional investors, retirement funds and pension funds, who have to provide future benefits and make responsible decisions considering all of the factors for their investors and retirees. So it's not just reasonable, it's necessary that people want to consider climate risk when making these savings decisions. Mr. Benvenu, CalPERS is responsible for pension benefits for over 1.5 million Californians, right?
That is correct, 2.2 million members and beneficiaries.
Okay. And do you have any sense of how many of the retirement plan participants will start receiving benefits after 2050, one of our climate change goals?
Well, frankly, we believe that we're going to be paying pensions for out to 2050, out to 2100 and beyond. We're a perpetuity that manages pensions for the current retirees, for people like myself that are current active members, and then people like, you know, my daughter's friend just joined the fire department, and when he retires, it'll be after 2050, but when he retires, we'll be paying his pension also.
Okay. Can you, like in plain English, give a little bit of an explanation about how climate risks can pose a threat to future retirees?
I mean, I think corporate history is littered with places where companies have taken short-term looks at generating short-term profits at the expense of long-term risks, whether that was legal risk, whether that was externalities, you name it. That has happened throughout corporate history. Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure that the companies that we invest in are not only focused on generating profits today, in this quarter, those pay our pensions now, but also in generating profits in 20 years, 40 years, 100 years, because that aligns with our liabilities, which are intergenerational.
Attorney General Ellison, given the significant and material climate risks to savings and retirement, should fiduciaries take climate risk into account when making investments on behalf of future retirees?
I think it's the only responsible way to discharge fiduciary responsibility. And I can assure you that it's the floods, it's the wildfires, it's the drought that are informing me and my fellow fiduciaries on the SBI board, not anything else.
We've heard accusations that initiatives to address climate change risks in investing somehow violate antitrust laws. You've looked at this, you've enforced antitrust things. Have you seen any actual evidence of antitrust violations in these responsible, sustainable investment initiatives?
You know, Congresswoman, I see antitrust violations in a whole range of American life, but not here. You know, this committee is so important, and I wish that we could talk about real antitrust threats, but not in this area.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request. Our Republican colleagues still seem a little confused about what an agreement means under antitrust law, so I'd ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the first page of the Climate Action 100 Signatory Handbook, which says Climate Action 100 Plus does not require or seek collective decision-making or action with respect to acquiring, holding, disposing, and/or voting of securities. Signatories are independent fiduciaries responsible for their own investment and voting decisions and must always act completely independently to set their own strategies, policies, and practices based on their own best interests.
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield back.
Generally yields back. The gentleman from Wisconsin is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Ms. Luber, in your 2022 annual report, you boasted that one of your key impacts for the year was being able to claim $62 trillion in assets under management by your members. That's a significant share of the investment market. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Ceres has signed the Net Zero Asset Managers Agreement. By signing on to that effort, your company has agreed to coordinate with over 300 other financial institutions to accelerate the transition towards global net zero emissions. Would you say that Ceres and its investor networks work together towards this shared goal?
We share information. Every asset manager who's part of the Net Zero Asset Manager enterprise.
And you do that through...
has their own goals. They're all different, and they all do it independently.
But you do that through communication with institutional investors, proxy advisor firms, other shareholders, correct?
We share information.
So in other words, you collaborate with members of your investor network, correct?
Collaborate by some definition, yes, not as it's been leading to meaning something else. We work with a number of investors who look for information, background facts on the financial implications of climate change.
But you're aware that collaboration to reduce, and you just said limited collaboration, whatever it might be, the reduced production isn't a violation of antitrust law.
Yeah, this is...
Why is this different?
We are not making decisions for anyone. We are not bringing people together to make joint decisions. We are sharing information on the financial risk of climate, whether it's $95 billion to the U.S. economy, to the insurance sector. That's our role. That is not...
Are there repercussions for signatories who fail to abide by their commitments?
There are not.
So according to this committee's interim staff report, if a company like BlackRock were not living up to its commitments, asset owners could decide to move their money elsewhere to be managed, which could mean billions of dollars in lost revenue to BlackRock.
Well, the only thing I've seen along those lines is the state of Texas pulling billions of dollars out of BlackRock, who's managing their funds, which is having a negative impact on the taxpayers of Texas. We have not caused...
So what you're saying is, has Ceres or any of its affiliates taken any retaliatory action
Absolutely
against
not.
a signatory for failure to abide by the commitments?
Emphatically no.
Ms. Lamb, Arjuna publicly advertises divestments from oil and gas, the firearms industry, and other industries it deems controversial. Arjuna has also joined initiatives that pressure companies and clients to align with its values. For example, Arjuna previously submitted a shareholder proposal to Exxon asking them to accelerate the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and to disclose new plans, targets, timetables for their reductions. Is that correct?
Prior to this hearing, my counsel sent a letter to Chairman Jordan and Chairman Massey and had conversations with both counsel for the majority and counsel for the minority regarding the fact I will not be answering questions about the litigation between Arjuna Capital and Exxon.
So when you ask that they accelerate the reduction of CHG emissions, you're asking them to reduce production of oil and gas, isn't that correct?
Prior to this hearing, my counsel sent a letter to Chairman Jordan and Chairman Massey and had conversations with both counsel for the majority and counsel for the minority regarding the fact
I'm
I will
not
be
sure how
answering
answering
questions.
these questions could get you in any hot water. When you say that Exxon should shrink, do you stand by that statement? You want Exxon to be a smaller corporation?
Prior to this hearing, my counsel sent a letter to Chairman Jordan and Chairman Massey and had conversations with both counsel for the majority and the minority regarding the fact I will not be answering questions about the litigation between Arjuna Capital and Exxon. As previously stated and on advice of counsel, I'm unable to answer any questions related to the litigation. I'm happy to answer
All right,
questions.
very good. I'll take that as a yes. Mr. Benenfu, Climate Action 100 Plus frequently flags key shareholder proposals and management votes for its members to signal priority initiatives. Votes flagged by Climate Action 100 then typically get the attention of the foreign-owned proxy advisory duopoly of Institutional Shareholder Services, ISS, and Glass Lewis and Company, which have combined 90% market share or advised mutual funds controlling $27 trillion in assets. In 2021, a foreign entity completed a 81% majority stake acquisition of ISS. Since that acquisition, ISS has persistently used its substantial market power to push American companies to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in line with net zero goals of the Paris Agreement. Let me just ask, does CalPERS consider whether recommendations from foreign-owned proxy advisors are in the best interest, not only of shareholders, but the U.S. national security?
CalPERS considers a myriad of topics when we think about how to vote our proxies. We take that very seriously. That's a very important part of what we do every day. And we have a mosaic where we consider many, many different sources of information and then put it all together in a mosaic and make a decision on what's in the best interest of our beneficiaries and our pension. And it is only that North Star about what's in the best interest of investment returns.
Thank you. Now you back.
Gentleman yields back. The ranking members now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record a New York Times article published August 10, 2023, titled, "How Climate Change Turned Lush Hawaii into a Tinderbox." Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an NBC News article published August 10, 2023, titled, "Drought and Wind, How Maui's Wildfires Turned into Tragedy."
Without objection.
And finally, Mr. Chairman, I ask consent to enter the record a KUT.org article published December 23, titled, "Energy Officials Warn of Winter Blackout Risks in Texas and Beyond."
Without objection.
Thank you.
Gentleman from California is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Trying to understand why we are here. Ms. Slubber, do you make money for the people who work with you?
Now it's on. Do I make money from people?
Do you make money for the people who work with you? Are you helping them make money? A return on their investment?
Indirectly. We certainly do an analysis of financial risks of climate change.
Ms. Lamb, do you help the people that are your clients make money?
Absolutely.
Mr. Bienvenu, do you help the people who are in your pension fund make money?
Absolutely. Over 20 and 30 years, our returns are in the 6 and 7+% range, in line with our assumed rate of return.
And Mr. Bienvenu, are you fireable? Meaning if you don't make money, can the people you work for get rid of you?
Absolutely.
Ms. Lamb, are you fireable if you don't make money?
Absolutely.
And Ms. Lover, if you're not providing advice that helps people make money, can they get rid of you?
Absolutely.
I don't understand why we're here, because you all, for the longest time, as long as I've been alive, and I'm the son of 2 Republicans, so I've heard this in my household a lot, you're the party of free markets. You believe that Democrats regulate too much, but you've hauled these 3 here to tell them you don't like how they're investing in the free market. You don't like how women make decisions about their bodies, and so you're banning abortions. You don't like how families make decisions to get pregnant, so you're banning IVF. And now you don't like when businesses invest in climate projects. And by the way, it's a little bit ironic because you have done nothing, as long as I've been in Congress, to mitigate against climate chaos. You've contributed by doing nothing to make the risks higher. These folks go out and, in their own investments, mitigate against the risk, make money for the people who work for them, and now you're saying they shouldn't do that. I want to talk a little bit about CalPERS because as I was reading Mr. Bienvenu, in the 2022-2023 year, CalPERS returned 6.1%. Is that about right?
That sounds about right.
Did you know that the largest pension fund in the state of Texas is the Teacher Retirement Fund of Texas?
I believe that's right.
Do you have any idea what they returned for their pensioners with an anti-ESG approach in their investing?
Candidly, I don't. We focus on our own fund and our own liabilities, and everything that we do, our liabilities are different from others, and we focus on our fund.
3.85%. So everything is bigger in Texas except the return on their pension fund because of their anti-ESG policies. Maybe they should be listening more to you and your strategies, Mr. Bienvenu. I also want to just ask Mr. Bienvenu, because I've heard all these allegations that you all make up a climate cartel. Who are the people in your fund, Mr. Bienvenu? Like, who are the pensioners? Where do they come from?
It's the hardworking firefighters, police officers, and public servants of the state of California.
What are some of the other jobs?
It's people that work at schools, not the teachers, but the people that work at the schools.
Janitors?
Janitors,
Okay.
corrections officers, people that work at the various state departments around the organization. And by the way, I'm a pensioner.
Right. So you and firefighters and police officers and janitors and hardworking correctional officers in California, and Miss Lamb, who as a woman goes into essentially, the lion's den of a male-dominated finance industry, starts her own business, and you all make up a climate cartel that's going to take down the oil companies? Am I tracking that right for my colleagues? If anyone wants to jump in here. Their lack of jumping in, I think, reflects the absurdity of the allegation, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and now recognize Mr. Van Drew for 5 minutes.